Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those who have joined us in person today and for those who are online. We welcome you as we begin 30 days to revolutionize your health. We invite you on this journey together with us, and we look forward to all that is in store as we learn about different aspects of health and as we do this together. So I have the privilege of opening and introducing our guest speaker, but before we move forward, I would definitely like to start with a word of prayer. Dear Father God, we thank you so much for this day that you have made. We thank you for the gift of life. We thank you for health and strength and a sound mind. We thank you for just the privilege to come together to learn of the ways that we can care for the temple, Lord, so that we can be healthy, we can be well, we can be used by you, Father. So we just ask for discernment and understanding. We ask that you would just give us ears to hear and that you would help us, empower us to put into practice everything that you would have us to do to be healthy and to live our best life, Father God, for your purpose. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, so over the next 4 weeks, we will have life-transforming information being brought to us, and that is going to be shared with by Dr. Avonelle Dorant. Dr. Avonelle Josiah Dorant is a medical doctor. She's an anesthesiologist who has been practicing in Indianapolis and the surrounding areas for the past 28 years. After obtaining her medical doctorate degree from Indiana University, IU, in 2000, she completed 4 years of training at IU before joining a large private practice in Indianapolis, Indianapolis Anesthesia Consultants of Indianapolis. She worked in this practice for 17 years, recently joining the Indiana University IU Health Physicians. In addition to her work as an anesthesiologist, she enjoys imparting knowledge about preventive health and wellness to relatives, friends, and her church community. She has been married for 30 years to Robert Dorant, and they have 3 children, Avery, age 21, Renelle, 18, and Aiden, age 15. I'd like to welcome Dr. Dorant, and I thought it would be good if we could ask a few questions, if I could ask a few questions, just so that we could get to know her a little bit better and familiarize her with the audience. So, Dr. Dorant, when did you become passionate about health?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Happy Sabbath, everyone.
Happy Sabbath. I'll repeat the question while Dr. Dorant gets situated with her microphone. All right. So, when did you become passionate about health?
That's a really interesting question. You would think that I've been passionate about health for a really long time because I've been in medicine for 22 years now in terms of when I graduated from medical school. But as you know, being in conventional medicine doesn't necessarily make you passionate about health itself. Mm-hmm. And so I think throughout the years as I have seen friends and families and the struggles that they have, and just as we start to age, just being interested in what works in terms of keeping you healthy and allowing you to have a good quality of life as you age, my awareness about staying healthy and preventative medicine was awakened more by seeing church members and the struggles that we go through, family members and the health struggles that we go through. How can we stay off of medication and stay out of the doctor's office rather than being treated for whatever ailments? So it has kind of evolved over the last few years.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So is there anything that you can think of in your own personal health journey that was significant for you? So I know obviously you see a lot with your patients. You mentioned just understanding the issues that individuals are going through in your church community, but what about your own health journey?
I have been really blessed in that I don't have any major health issues. it has not been necessarily easy for me to even make all the right decisions in terms of following the straight and narrow and doing all the right things. So I'm blessed in that I don't have any particular health struggles. I know that I am not one who particularly enjoys exercise. I have to coach myself and pay people to push me. But I understand the benefit and the importance of it.
Okay.
And so even as I have seen myself, start to lose some muscle mass or not be as strong as I want to be, I've realized that I need to myself kick it in a notch and practice what I'm preaching.
I definitely understand. That's why sometimes exercising together is very important.
Absolutely.
Like we can encourage one another.
Yes.
So, all right, so I'm going to switch it up a little bit. Just some random kind of fun fact, this or that question. So, which one for you, this or that, fruit or vegetables?
Fruit.
Okay, and which is your favorite fruit?
That's a good question. I like the berries.
Okay.
It may be because I understand the importance of the berries, but blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries.
Okay. Love those.
Those are what I'm going to eat rather than the melons. So, and rather than banana. And I like mango. I like the taste of mango, but I don't like the teeth, the hair in the teeth situation that accompanies eating mangoes.
I never really thought about that. Yeah,
That's a
true.
problem for people that have, little spaces and stuff. So I think the berries are probably my favorite.
Okay. All right. Mountains or the beach?
Definitely the beach.
Okay, and
There's
why?
no question about that. No question. Yeah.
Any
It's
favorite
just-
beach that you've been to?
One of my favorite beaches is definitely, is it Browns Beach in Barbados? Definitely one of my favorite beaches. I like the relaxation that the beach brings. I love the scenery, the sun, and the white sand and the blue water, and that is just really relaxing for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not naturally a physical activity person. I'm not going to run to the mountains unless they're calling my name and I need to hide or something. So I'm going to definitely be more of a beach person.
That's your peaceful place.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and this is going back to the exercise. Walk or run?
I'm a walker,
Okay.
and I'm almost opposed to running fundamentally. I just think that you have so much potential for wearing out your joints, and that's just because I've worked with so many people who've done marathons and half marathons and full marathons, and then in a few years, they need a joint. They need, their ankles are hurting them, their knees need to be replaced. And so I'm kind of like, I want to go the long haul.
Okay.
So I integrate some sprinting, some running within the walking, but I'm not like, I'm never going to tell you, Dr. DeRose says to sign up for a marathon, but I stop short of that advice because I think that our joints need to take us the extra mile. You don't want your joints to wear out before you do.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very
brisk
good.
walking or a little bit of running.
Very good. And well, there's so many benefits to walking, so
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for allowing us to get to know you a little bit
Yeah.
better. We look forward to all the information you have to share with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sister Pinkston. I am absolutely delighted to be here this afternoon. This is one of the first evenings in Indianapolis that we're getting up over 80 degrees. So, and that's probably why our attendance is really low, but it doesn't really matter. The information that I'm going to share is priceless, and whether you're here or whether you're looking online, there's just so much good information out there that we need to try and harness because knowledge is power, and it's going to help you in the long run. So over the next month, we're going to be covering several topics. I'm going to be doing the first 4 presentations. So today, Wednesday at 7 o'clock, next Sabbath afternoon at 5, and then we'll be doing this until May the 18th, okay? So there'll be 8 presentations overall. and we're going to cover cardiovascular, the topics that are really, really important for health, and specifically to the U.S. population are topics that we're going to try and do a deep dive into. So we'll definitely talk about cancers, we'll talk about hypertension and heart disease, we'll talk about obesity, we'll talk about stress a little bit, even though there is a specific presentation that's happening on Thursday nights for depression and anxiety recovery, and that's at Thursday nights at 6:30. So they're talking about stress all the way. We're just going to touch on it and relate trauma and stress to obesity, and we'll do that on May the 11th. That's a Wednesday night Zoom presentation, and then just getting hold of your stress. And then there's also a program that we're also doing on Monday nights at 7 p.m., Loss and Recovery Program. So we want to make sure that you are tuning in Monday evenings, Wednesday evenings, and Thursday evenings, and then the Sabbath afternoons will be for the next 5 weeks or so. So today's presentation is specifically on the Methuselah factor, and I'm using a book that was written by David J. DeRose. He's a board-certified specialist in internal medicine and also in preventative medicine, and in addition, he has a master's in public health. And so this uniquely qualifies him to be able to talk on these type of issues, these type of matters, because he is seeing patients. They're coming into his office, and he's a Seventh-day Adventist physician, by the way. And I think he practices in California right now. But with his research and with his patient care, he's been able to come up with a lot of really solid information, and he's not an extremist, and I like that about him. So he is very encouraging in his approach in terms of trying to have you make changes that will influence and impact your health. And I want to award a book this evening to someone who came early. And I spoke to the person who came first, and he said he's not an avid reader. So we're going to give it to the person who is next in line, and that is Siobhan and Randy Loney, who are here. This is a gift because you're here, and it will allow you to follow along and to read, and as soon as you graduate from your master's program, you'll have time to actually get on board with, making changes to your health. So congratulations to you. So how many of you have ever heard the term hemorrheology? Hemorrheology. I had not heard that term, to be very honestly. I don't expect that lay people may have heard the term. If you've read the book, then you may have, Cynthia has read the book, so she knows exactly what we're talking about. But most lay people, and even many medical professionals, have never heard this term. But there are compelling reasons why every one of you should learn about this particular science, because it offers incredible promise for enhancing your well-being and increasing your lifespan. So what exactly is hemorrheology? So it's a science of the physical properties of blood flow in the circulatory system. I don't know if you can read that. The science concerning the properties of blood and the way it flows in the circulatory system. So our circulatory system composes of our heart and then many blood vessels, great vessels, arteries, veins, and then capillaries. And the way the blood moves through this system either helps you to be healthy or contributes to illness. So in plain English, it's the science that describes how effectively the blood is flowing through your body, how effectively it's nourishing your tissues, and how effectively it's eliminating waste. Hemorrheology is also called the Methuselah factor. And I think that's where he got the name of the book from, the Methuselah factor. So who exactly is or was Methuselah? Does anybody know who Methuselah was? Right, okay, and thank you for answering. I want to invite you guys who are here. It's not a lot, but please come a little closer because I want to be able to interact with you a little bit. So if you guys can come a little closer, I would really appreciate it. So the Old Testament Hebrew patriarch Methuselah lived the longest in the Bible, 900 and how much? Does anybody know how long Methuselah lived? Yes, 900. We have some brilliant students today. 969 years. And 969, who was Methuselah's father? So Methuselah, Enoch, thank you, Aiden. So Methuselah was the son of Enoch, and he was the grandfather of Noah. We know about Noah, of course, but we don't hear much about Methuselah. So why is hemorrheology so important? Hemorrheology being the Methuselah factor. Why is hemorrheology so important? So over a century ago, long before we understood all the nuances of blood and blood flow, there was a non-medical writer who said, perfect health depends upon perfect circulation. Perfect health depends upon perfect circulation. In other words, lack of circulation initiates the presence of death, blockage, call it what you want. Lack of his circulation initiates the presence of death. So in medical literature, there are several examples of why we should understand this subject and actively seek to improve our own blood fluidity. Think about it. If blood is not flowing through your veins, if blood is not coursing through your arteries, then what is happening? Yeah, there's lack of nutrients going to whatever is downstream of that blockage. There's lack of oxygen to whatever is downstream of that blockage. So we know that optimal hemorrheology can help to address and prevent your risk of stroke, coronary artery disease, blindness, glaucoma or macular degeneration, cancer, cognitive decline. A lot of us are really concerned about dementia. A lot of us either have a parent or grandparent who has some kind of dementia. So it's always in the back of our heads in terms of, and then when I start forgetting things, you're thinking, well, what's really happening here? Hypertension, diabetes, peripheral vascular disease. Peripheral vascular disease refers to problems in your extremities. Either you have problems with your feet, they're always cold, you have a toe that's not healing properly because it's not getting sufficient blood flow, weight gain, arthritis, age-related physical deterioration, or even, for those who are young, suboptimal performance in a person who's otherwise young and fit. So hemorrheology, if you can optimize your hemorrheology, it's going to influence all of these different diseases and help you to do better as far as these are concerned. So hemorrheology is also called the Methuselah factor. It's the same thing. They're interchangeable. What we're going to talk about is how to improve your Methuselah factor. That's what we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks. If you're able to improve your Methuselah factor, then you're going to be able to decrease your risk of stroke, decrease your risk of heart attacks, your risk of cancer, your risk of mental decline, and your risk of diabetes, which means if you have these things, then you can get into a better situation where you can reduce your meds, get off your meds, and just live your best life now. Improve your vision and also improve your mental clarity. So over a decade ago, there were some scientists in the country of Hungary, the Hungarian scientists, that they were led by a scientist called Laszlo Saperi, and they sought to uncover association between stroke and factors affecting blood fluidity. And so the study involved 300 patients, and they came up with 4 key hemorrheology factors that impaired, these are factors or impairing blood factors that were connected with stroke, okay? So this study was done in Hungary, involved 300 patients, and they came up with 4 major factors that influence are connected with stroke. And we're going to extrapolate because these factors, even though I'm going to talk specifically about stroke, these factors are also very much involved in the initiation or cause of heart attacks and also the cause of other lifestyle or degenerative diseases, okay? So understanding what these blood factors are will help you not only better appreciate the linkage with stroke, but it will also lay a foundation for connecting hemorrhagic with other disease states as well. So the type of stroke that was studied by Sapari and his colleagues were of the ischemic variety. In other words, strokes caused by lack of blood supply to the brain. It's a catastrophic event which occurs when blood vessels become blocked either progressively or by sudden obstruction. Atherosclerotic debris can come from little clots in your neck and break loose and travel up to the brain. Does anybody know anybody who has had a stroke? Okay, so what are some of first of all, remember that the arteries that move away from the heart are carrying organs either up towards the head or down towards your legs, and the artery is carrying blood either up towards your head, towards your organs, or towards your extremities and your legs, right? So these are the 4 key hemorrhagic blood factors that they found in the study that were connected with ischemic strokes. Number 1 was hematocrit. And we're going to go into detail about what these are. Number 2 was the viscosity of the blood. And number 3 was erythrocytes or red blood cell aggregation. And number 4 was plasma or fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is a clotting factor. Actually, it's clotting factor number 1. And fibrinogen becomes fibrin, and fibrin forms the basis of our clots. So there's another type of stroke that they did not study. This is called a hemorrhagic stroke. And with a hemorrhagic stroke, it's caused by what? What do you think causes the major cause of a hemorrhagic stroke? Bleeding. Right, bleeding. So whereas an ischemic stroke is caused by lack of blood flow, the hemorrhagic stroke is caused by too much blood flow. And so you may have a ruptured blood vessel or like an aneurysm. That's what it is. Usually that person has had really high blood pressure over time, or you can have something you have a traumatic experience. So in other words, someone who's riding a motorcycle or a bicycle, and they get struck, or someone who is skiing and they go headfirst into a tree, they're going to have a hemorrhagic situation where they have bleeding on the brain, and that could be fatal, of course. But let's talk about the 4 blood measurements, or the 4 factors which increase the risk of stroke. First of all, we talked about what a stroke is in terms of what would you describe as a stroke? What do you see as a stroke? What's your best description of what a stroke is? Anyone? What? Okay, so paralysis. So paralysis is actually one of the symptoms of stroke. So paralysis is definitely something that happens after you have had a stroke. But how would you describe a stroke itself? What is happening when you have a stroke? So blockage, I heard Cynthia, you can take your mask down because there's no one around you. That way I can actually hear and read your lips a little bit. It's lack of blood flow to a particular area, to the brain. So a stroke is like a brain attack. I don't know why we don't use that term. We use the term heart attack. A stroke is a brain attack, okay? So you have damage to the brain from an interruption of its blood flow. So that picture shows an area in the brain that's blue when it's supposed to be red, and that's because that area has had a blood clot in the middle of a cerebral artery, okay? And because of that, the tissue that's beyond that clot all of a sudden is not getting sufficient nutrients, oxygen, and blood sugar, okay? And those things are going to cause the tissue in that upstream of that particular blockage, the tissue is going to start to do what? It's going to start to die. And so a stroke is you have minutes Brain cells begin to die within minutes, and you can have irreversible brain damage that happens. So it's a true medical emergency, okay? Just like a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, a stroke is a brain attack, and many times it has devastating, life-altering results. So if I had to choose between having a heart attack and a stroke, my choice will be, I'll take the heart attack. Because there's so many things that they can do. I've met a lot of patients who've had heart attacks, and they look like they're completely fine. Like there's nothing, you can't tell they've had a heart attack. But the patients that I've met, patients that I've taken care of that have had strokes, there's usually residual deficits that they have from the stroke. Okay, so let's talk about some of those residual deficits. Let's talk about some of the problems that they can have from having a stroke. And Sister Bailey, you mentioned paralysis. Often you have paralysis on one side of your body or the other. So if you stroked on your right side of the brain, then your left side of the body tends to be paralyzed. Any other symptoms that you know that patients can have if they have had a stroke? Speech. They have aphasia, what we call aphasia. So they have problems finding words, they have problems making words, they have problems making sentences. Okay? So speech is affected. Anything else? Memory. A lot of people have memory loss after they've had a stroke. It's almost like they've had brain damage, honestly, because they have, like traumatic brain damage. They may have numbness in their face. They have numbness on their arms. They have drooping on one side of the face. And they have problems with walking, okay? So the first one, in terms of the 4 major hemorrheology blood factors that cause ischemic strokes, the first one we're going to talk about is hematocrit. So let's talk a little bit about hematocrit and stroke. So hematocrit is the portion of red blood cells in your blood. So if you look at that tube up on the screen, you have plasma on the top. You have your entire blood volume, and then at the top is plasma, and at the bottom is red blood cells. We also call it RBC, or erythrocytes. So the percentage of that amount in the whole blood is called a hematocrit. And we hear a lot about anemia, right? What is anemia? What's happening in a patient who's anemic? They don't have enough what? They don't have enough iron, which leads to lack of RBCs, so they don't have enough red blood cells. So this is like the opposite. So hematocrit, anemia is when you have too few red blood cells. Iron deficiency and anemia is one type of anemia. There are different types of anemias. But what about if you have a higher hematocrit than you ought to have? So more red blood cells in a given volume. Okay, your volume is, the amount of blood you have in your body is only so much. So if you're making a lot more red cells and white cells and platelets, then you have a higher hematocrit. And just think about, just as the body needs red blood cells to carry oxygen to your tissues, communities need essential public services. So they need vehicles like a garbage truck, and they need a fire truck, and they need police cars, and they need utility vehicles, and they need all of these things functioning within a community in order for it to work. So here's a question. Is a community that has more public service vehicles going to be better off? Yes. Any other answers? So a community that has all these vehicles moving is going to be better off to a point, right? What happens if there's a fire and the streets are so clogged with garbage trucks and utility vehicles and police cars, and they're all clogging the streets, and the fire truck can't get to its destination? What's going to happen? The house is going to burn down, right? So it's the same concept when you're thinking about the body. Your arteries and veins are the highways in your body. They're the thoroughfares of the body. And these roads of your body can be clogged when you have too many red blood cells. This is a problem when we have high hematocrit. So you get like a traffic jam. If too large a percentage of your blood is made up of red blood cells, they don't circulate freely. They get backed up. They get bottled up. And your circulation is going to suffer. You face a higher risk of stroke. That's one of the major risk factors of stroke. It's not one we hear about, but it's definitely one of the 4 major factors. So in terms of what causes a high hematocrit, there's a condition called polycythemia, where it's a genetic condition that predisposes you or your bone marrow to make more red blood cells than you need. And so you're making more red blood cells. You may also have an increase in white blood cells and platelets. And all these things in the same volume of liquid causes congestion. So that's one of the causes of hematocrit being high. There's another cause of hematocrit being high, and this can happen, well, I guess, let's just say if you're getting really dehydrated because you're not drinking sufficient fluids, you're going to have a higher than normal hematocrit, and that actually increases your risk for stroking, believe it or not. So, and it also puts you at a higher risk for heart attacks as well. So there's a particular, I don't know, you call it like something that people used to do, where they would come in and let the doctor draw their blood, okay, store their blood, and then before they had a particular event, usually an athletic event, they would go back and have the physician transfuse them with the blood. Does anybody know what this is called? Okay, it's called blood doping. I don't know if you've heard this term. So this is a situation where athletes would go in and have their bloods drawn, and then before their event, their race, whatever it is, their swim event, they would go back and have the blood that they had drawn, their own blood, have it given back to them. And the idea is that on race day, you would have substantially higher crit or hematocrit, which allows you to carry more oxygen and perform better. But it came at a very high price because your hemorrheology became compromised. And because now your blood has probably already made back the lack that it had from when you took it out. Now you're putting all this extra blood back into your body. It's called blood doping. What sport used blood doping in the past? Cycling, yeah. So the cyclists used blood doping. And some of them would skip the whole transfusion mess, and they would just allow themselves to be given injections of a hormone called erythropoietin. So for people that have kidney failure, they're usually on a medication called EPO, or erythropoietin, where they get injections, and this helps their bone marrow to generate the red blood cells that it needs, because kidney disease can cause you to have anemic. There's anemia of kidney disease. So these athletes would be giving themselves this erythropoietin, and it would cause them to make extra blood cells. But there were a few athletes that end up dying because of this after the Tour de France, because they would get increased stroke and they would get increased heart attacks after the race. So young, healthy guys were falling out dead after these races because of this bad practice, blood doping, because it interfered with their hematocrit. So there's the second major factor, Aiden, I'll need you for a second. The second major factor that involves or interferes or contributes to stroke is your viscosity. So what is one simple act that we all can do to improve our Methuselah factor? You got it. Keeping well hydrated is very, very important to optimizing your Methuselah factor. This fluid that I just consumed, we're going to do a little experiment so you can see. We're going to demonstrate viscosity. So Aiden, I need you to pour a little bit of water over really quickly. And then we're going to pour over a little bit of maple syrup. You see how much slower the maple syrup is? You can actually go ahead and finish that because we don't even use that. And if we do, we shouldn't. Although it's better than pancake syrup, but it's still very sweet. And then the third fluid that we're going to pour over is what? Okay. And we were supposed to have a spoon, but we don't. So what you cannot see is, look how slowly that one pours, and look how thick it is. So which of these, Aiden, can you tell us which one has a high viscosity and which one has a low viscosity, and why?
The molasses has the highest viscosity because this is the one that is most resistant to flowing, and the water has the lowest viscosity because it flows and it moves and it separates the quickest. And the syrup, even though it is viscous, it still moves pretty fast, but the molasses is the thickest, thus giving it the highest viscosity.
Okay, thank you so much. So that's just to illustrate so you can actually see viscosity. So you can imagine if I drank olive oil, if I chose to drink olive oil, or if I drank molasses, one, versus water, one, I might start to feel a little sick, and two, what's going to be happening in my blood? What's going to be happening with my red cells, and what's going to be happening inside there? What would you imagine is going to be happening? Things are moving slower, and they've actually been able to show under microscope that when we consume like a whole ton of sugar at one time, how our red cells actually slow down. They're actually getting jammed up in the blood, especially in the capillaries. It was amazing to see. So viscosity refers to the property of a fluid or semi-fluid to resist flow. So how thick the fluid is. So obviously, if the fluid resists flow, it has a good viscosity. So molasses had the highest viscosity. If it flows very well, then it has the low viscosity. And so you want to be consuming beverages that have low viscosity as frequently as you can so that you can dilute your blood and keep it thin. We also are able to measure viscosity in the blood. So if you have a blood tube, then you can, at the top of the blood is the plasma, and you're able to measure the viscosity in the plasma, which is the top part. So the crit would be the one on the bottom, and the plasma would be the one on the top. And so Sapari's research increase in both plasma and whole blood viscosity were linked to greater risk of cerebrovascular disease, such as strokes and heart attacks. Are you getting the main point in terms of the major things that can cause you to be ill over time? So anything that causes your blood to flow less freely or causes greater viscosity could impair optimal blood flow to vital regions such as your brain or your heart muscle, putting you at higher risk for stroke or heart attacks. So the third factor that was found in this study by Sapari and his colleagues was that led to stroke, that gave you an increased risk of having a stroke, was erythrocyte aggregation. Okay? So let's touch on erythrocyte. Erythrocyte is just a fancy name for red blood cells. Okay? It's the same thing. Sapari and colleagues, they found in their research that red blood cells tend to clump together. If they do this, then you have a higher chance of having a stroke or a heart attack. So we know that the red blood cells always move through the capillaries. And within a capillary, the thing about capillaries is that our capillaries are really small. They go down to about 6 to 8. The smallest capillaries actually get down to 2 to 3 microns, okay? But the smallest red blood cell is about 6 to 8 microns. So what is smaller? Is the thoroughfare smaller or is the vehicle smaller? Let me say that again. The smallest capillaries, you have arteries, then veins and capillaries, gets down to about 2 to 3 microns in the body, micrometers. But the smallest red blood cells is about 6 to 8. That's the average size of a blood cell. You can move the slide forward. So, in other words, the red blood cell has a larger diameter than the actual capillary itself. Okay? So how can that be? So red blood cells are able to, well, imagine first of all that you're driving through an alley. And you're driving down this alley, and as you drive, and those red blood cells are in single file, you can see that. And that's what happens in the body. They have to get down from having a whole bunch to single file in order to actually give your tissues the oxygen it needs, okay? So you're driving through this alley, and as you move along, you notice that the walls are getting smaller and smaller. The buildings are coming towards you. At some point, you're going to have to make a decision. Are you going to keep going forward and getting jammed, or you're going to, what? Stop and reverse, right? Back out. So that's what you're going to do. Stop it. If you see that happening, you're going to stop and back out. So think about what would happen if you were driving, but now you have all these cars following you. What's going to happen? You're going to have a crash, or you're not going to be able to reverse, or you're just going to have a collection of vehicles that are going to be jamming up that little alleyway. So this illustration gives you a glimpse of what is happening in the circulatory system at every instant. The RBCs cannot back out. There are literally millions of RBCs or red blood cells that line up behind the one that's in front. And all the flow, if you have a good heart, is unidirectional. It's going the same way. So they're all traveling the same road if you have a heart that functions well. So why isn't it that we don't have gridlock in our blood vessels more frequently? If you're a healthy person, why are you not having gridlock? Does anybody have any idea how this works? So just like a car in an alleyway had to stop and back up not to be pinned, but the RBCs or the red blood cells are malleable. They can't back up, but they're malleable. So they're able to actually bend. They fold. They fold down, and they fold on itself, and they're able to squeeze through very tiny capillaries. And that's because of their shape. So RBCs are biconcave discs. They look like a lifesaver candy, okay? They have, think about a donut or a lifesaver. Or no, can you turn off these lights? They have, they're lighter or thinner in the middle and then fatter around the outside. And they're very malleable. So they're able to bend and to move. There are two major challenges for red blood cells. One is that you can have an increase in rigidity or stiffness, okay? And this is especially so in the very early mornings between 6 o'clock in the morning and noon. And this is why we tend to have heart attacks and strokes between the time that we are most likely we're more at risk for having a heart attack or having a stroke is early morning, okay? Don't know if you knew that. Early morning that's the time when you find that your red blood cells are going to be a little bit more stiff. You have erythrocyte aggregation or red blood cell clumping. So if they're clumping together, if they're sticking to each other, if they're very sticky, then there's nothing you can do. They're not going to be able to move very well through those capillaries. So you have gridlock in your capillaries. Like a car, it cannot back out. So these red blood cells, which are usually very malleable, they can become very stiff, and they aggregate. Okay, so let's recap. There are 4 things that we talked about. One was that you have high hematocrit. Well, there's 3 things so far. High hematocrit. The second one is that you can have a decrease in your viscosity. These are all factors that contribute to increased stroke, increased heart attack. And then the third one is that you have factors in your blood that can make them very sticky and they aggregate or they stick together. And then we're going to be sharing some simple life steps that can help affect these changes. The fourth factor that the Hungarian researchers found was that fibrinogen, okay? Your fibrinogen level influences whether or not your risk for stroke. So fibrinogen is a clotting protein. It's one of the key players in the whole clotting symphony. And I remember from medical school, you have so many clotting factors, there's like 13 clotting factors, and everyone has a cascade that it goes through. It's very, very complicated. Bottom line is fibrinogen becomes fibrin, and then that's what forms the clot, okay? So if you look at this slide, all that white stuff, that's fibrin. So you have fibrinogen, or clotting protein, is one of the key players. It is activated by inflammation and by different things in the blood, and when it's working properly, it stops you from bleeding. If you have a cut or something, everything goes there, it stops you from bleeding. It's converted to fibrin, it forms a clot. So these are the four major factors that were found to increase the risk of stroke, the risk of heart attacks: hematocrit, viscosity, red blood cell aggregation, and plasma fibrinogen. Now that you understand these key physiologic players, it was really important that I lay the foundation in terms of helping you to understand what's happening in your body that cause these major diseases such as stroke and heart attacks. Macular degeneration, which leads to blindness, is one of the major causes of blindness, and dementia. I talk about stroke because, of course, it's very devastating, it's very life-changing. Most of you know someone who has had a stroke. What are some very simple, very basic, yet very effective lifestyle changes that you can make to improve your hemorrheology, also known as your Methuselah factor? What is that? So diet, definitely diet, changes in your diet. And we're going to focus on 3 today because we can't cover everything today. But we'll for sure be focusing on diet in the week to come. Number 1 that I want to talk about in terms of what we need to do and the importance of it is the water. So challenge number 1 is that we want you to water up. Okay? This week, water up. Drinking ample amounts of water may not be, it actually is one of the simplest ways to improve our blood fluidity. Reduced water intake is one of the things that lead to stiffening of the red blood cell membranes, and that worsens your rheology. So you remember we talked about the fact that the red blood cells need to be malleable. They have to be able to bend in order to get through the capillaries. If you're dehydrated, guess what's not happening? Those red blood cells lose their ability to fold and to move through. And so those red blood cells are going to cause a traffic jam in the capillaries. And the traffic jam is going to cause aggregation and clumping. And when there's aggregation and clumping, you tend to have fibrin activation, okay? So it sets up a situation where you're going to have a clot forming, where you're going to have a higher risk of stroke. People that have strokes and have heart attacks didn't think they were going to have it. They're normal, regular people just like you and I. But they're just not taking all the precautions that they need to take sometimes, okay? So it's simple changes that really make a big dent in terms of disease, in terms of keeping disease at bay. So drinking ample amounts of water is one of the simplest ways to improve our blood fluidity because it helps our red blood cells to be malleable and to keep them moving. Drinking water, by its impact on blood fluidity, it has been linked to cardiovascular benefits. There was a study that was done by Dr. Jacqueline Chang and her fellow researchers, and this study is out of Loma Linda University, and she and her colleagues studied 20,000 adult men and women. And those who drank more water, they cut their risk of death from heart disease by approximately 50% over 6 years. Did you guys hear what I said? Those who drank more water cut their risk of death from heart disease by approximately 50%. That's huge over a 6-year time. So What do we mean by more water? So there was not in the study, there was not a massive intake difference. 3 glasses of water separated the 2 groups of people, all right? So those at highest risk consume less than 2 glasses of water per day. This is 2 glasses of water, okay? A bottle of water has 16 fluid ounces. A glass is 8 fluid ounces, so this is two cups, 2 glasses of water. So those who were at risk for having, those who are at high risk for having problems with their heart consume less than this a day. How many of you consume less than this a day at times? So it seems like it's a little bit of water to drink, but if you're in a classroom, if you're in the operating room, and no one's coming to give you a break, then you tend to limit your water consumption so you don't have to go to the bathroom. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. So when I read this, I was like, oh my goodness. 3 glasses separated those who were going to do well from those who were not going to do well over time. So it's important and interesting to note also that in Dr. Chang's research, drinking other beverages other than water did not provide the same benefit. It's not just drinking orange juice or apple juice or coffee that's going to help. It's water. You cannot substitute anything else and just call it a liquid. Interestingly enough. In fact, those who drank the most fluid from non-water sources actually increased their risk from heart disease, like up to like 150%. It was unbelievable. And I think that's probably because if they're drinking non-water sources, they're probably drinking caffeine. They're probably drinking sugar, a lot of sugar. So they're getting, you're getting some volume, but you're taking in so many toxins and other things that are negatively influencing your hemorrheology that in the long run, it's not good for you. So water, at least, we'll come back to water in a little bit, but definitely want to be drinking at least 5 glasses a day. Those that drank at least 5 glasses lowered their risk the most. 5 glasses, which is like 2.5 of these. Okay? So we should be aiming for at least 3 of these. So what about alcohol consumption? While we're talking about drinking, what about alcohol consumption? Alcohol lowers the risk of heart disease in some populations. According to research, alcohol lowers the risk of heart disease in some populations. True or false? False. True. False. False. True. We got 2 trues and like 3 false. Okay. What do you want it to be? We want it to be false, right? Okay, so this is actually true. In some studies, alcoholic consumption in moderation has been shown to help lower the risk of heart disease. However, there's always a but. In some groups, alcohol consumption provided no heart or circulatory benefits. So there was a small, and so the explanation, they're thinking, the explanation that was proposed, I guess, is that because alcohol is derived from plants, plants have something called phytochemicals. And so for people who, phytochemicals are like health-giving compounds that are found in food. So if a person is on a diet that's completely bereft of phytochemicals, in other words, this person eats no fresh vegetables and no fruit. They're basically a meat type of person, or meat and dairy and maybe a little bit of potatoes. All right? They're not eating a lot of fresh vegetables, they're not eating a lot of fruit. If this person consumes an occasional glass of wine, they may get some benefits, right, from the alcohol. However, if you're consuming a diet that has plenty of plant food, which is obviously the ideal diet, there is no added benefit that you're going to get from consuming alcohol, like none. So leaving off the alcohol should improve your fluidity and increase your likelihood of good health in many other areas. In fact, let's look at some of the downsides of alcohol. Alcohol is always good to refresh our knowledge on alcohol because, you know, we are aware that people in the Bible imbibed alcohol, and even though in our church it's very much discouraged, you know, there are people who are of the ilk that, okay, a little bit might be good for the stomach's sake, as the word says. But let's look at some of the downsides of alcohol consumption, okay? And let's see where we're going to come out. So the U.S. CDC, or the Center for Disease and Control and Prevention, they estimate that as many as up to 88,000 Americans die each year from the use of alcohol. That's a lot of people dying from alcohol consumption. And it's not just, in this case, it's not just consumption. It may be trauma, it may be accidents and stuff like that, and then there's different diseases that people who have alcohol will experience, okay? So it's not just alcoholics that are at increased risk of death. It's people that are social drinkers. They just have a drink now once in a while. They're also at increased risk of death. Moderate drinkers. So moderate drinking puts you at higher risk of death, even from unintentional injuries such as automobile accidents. And this is even if you don't get drunk, even without intoxication, you know. So even sporadic drinking, once in a while, can increase your risk of cancer. Were you guys aware of that? I wasn't really aware of that. Even sporadic drinking can increase your risk of cancer. So many alcohol consumption, any alcohol consumption actually increases your risk of having a malignancy. Now, the cancers that alcohol tends to increase are mainly head and neck cancers. So, like as an anesthesiologist, we do cancers on the base of the tongue, right? The pharynx, down by the vocal cords, esophageal cancers, where they have to remove the esophagus. And then colon cancers and breast cancer in women, these are the type of cancers that if you're drinking alcohol, you are at higher risk for. And in addition, alcohol also impairs your blood fluidity. So you get all the negative effects from the higher risk of cancers, but it also is not giving you favorable hemorrheology, okay, or blood fluidity. In addition, here's what you get for consuming alcohol: worsened insulin resistance. Did you know that? So this especially seems to affect people who have breathing problems such as sleep apnea. Worsening insulin resistance. In other words, they're going to tend to have a higher blood sugar because the insulin's not working. It's there, but the body's resisting it. And then alcohol also elevates triglyceride levels. Triglycerides are, what's another word for triglycerides? What is that in terms of the blood? Huh? Okay, so it's not necessarily cholesterol, but it's found in the same spectrum as cholesterol, is the blood fat. Okay, so it's fat level. So alcohol elevates triglycerides, and triglycerides worsen your hemorrheology. So, and then because alcohol contributes to poor fluidity, it also contributes to excess weight gain and obesity. And there's actually a link between excess weight gain, insulin resistance, and inflammation. So there's a whole cascade, a pathway that's happening when we choose to go down the alcohol pathway, okay? So get this, alcohol is one of the most calorically dense substances on the planet. It looks very harmless, it looks transparent, almost like water, but it's so full of calories. Did you guys know this? So starches and sugars and proteins are like 4 calories per gram. Okay, if you eat in terms of things that are going to help you put on weight. Starches or carbohydrates and proteins are 4 calories per gram. Alcohol has nearly double this. So alcohol weighs in at about 7 calories per gram. The only thing that's more dense than alcohol is actually eating fat itself, which fat is about 9 calories per gram. So there's more bad news about alcohol. We know that it depresses the frontal lobe, okay? So this is the seat of your wisdom, seat of judgment, seat of your foresight. So even with a little bit of drinking, you tend to be more likely to overeat because there's nothing that's stimulating or prompting you to stop eating. So if you have problems, if you're one of those people that have problems curbing your appetite, then the glass of wine should not be your appetizer because you're going to tend to overeat and you're going to have problems with weight. So alcohol intake contributes also to bone loss. So for ladies, osteoporosis is a risk factor, high blood pressure, and digestive problems. Not to mention the fact that, of course, we know that alcohol affects which major organ in the body directly? The liver, okay? So the risk that associated with the alcohol consumption definitely outweigh any cardiovascular benefits, which we're probably not going to be seeing those benefits anyway because we're not the population of people that don't consume fruits and vegetables. So alcohol is doing really nothing for you. So if you're here today, if you're listening online, it's because you desire to improve your longevity. You want a certain quality of living. So it will be best to leave alcohol alone totally. Just leave it out the program. Let's get back to water. So how much water should you drink? How much water should I drink? What's that? Yeah, okay, so she hit the nail on the head. Half your body weight in ounces. Half your body weight in ounces. So according to Dr. Chan's research, the greatest heart protection occurred when somebody drank, or when people drank at least five 8-ounce glasses per day. And the way to, so it's a minimum of 5 glasses, okay? But a better way to gauge this is to take your ideal body weight, not necessarily how much you weigh, but what should be your ideal body weight. There are charts online that show you, depending on your height, and if you're male or female, what your ideal body weight should be, okay? So I'm 5'6", and my ideal body weight falls between 118 and 148 pounds. So for me, let's say 140 pounds. Let's go with 140. Divide that by 2, so you get 70. I need to be drinking at least 70 ounces of water per day, okay? So this is 16 ounces of water. When I divided it down, it came to about 4 bottles, 4 of these per day, 4 bottles. And the drinking of the water needs to begin pretty much as soon as you wake up in the morning. Because what did I say was the time of the day that you have highest risk of heart attack and stroke? In the morning. That's because your hemorrheology is at its worst. You've been laying all night. You haven't been up, you haven't been active, everything's been settling, and you haven't been stretching, and you haven't been consuming anything. So getting that water in early in the morning and then continuing throughout the day is very important. So if you're going in terms of glasses, it was like 8 to 9 glasses is what I came up with. 8 to 9 glasses of 8 ounces per day is what's ideal. But if it's a bottle like this, I tend to use bottles, then it's about 4 a day. So for those who have problems with your kidneys or your heart, before you begin taking a bunch of water, if you have problems with congestive heart failure, you need to talk to your doctor because you're on a fluid-restricted regimen. You can tilt yourself way to the other side where you get into trouble. So you want to make changes in consultation with a physician, okay? But we're trying to aim to prevent these diseases. That's the goal, okay, to keep you from getting to that point. So water up, alcohol down. So number 3, did you guys know, this is the third challenge. The first challenge is water up. The second challenge is alcohol down. The third challenge is about, we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of blood donation. Now, I work in the medical field, and I actually remember the last time, which was very recently, that I had a patient, we do what we call a type and cross, and which means you get the patient's blood, and you have to send it to the lab. They'll tell you the patient's blood type and find other blood to match it. And, you know, we just kind of give our orders, like type and cross for 4 units. I want 4 units. And then the nurse comes back, well, the blood bank says that, like, do you really need 4 units? Because they're having a blood shortage. So, in other words, don't ask for more than you really need. Reduce it if you can. So the point I'm making right now is that there is a need for donors. And whereas we know that people who are ill, people who are having surgery, people who have been in trauma may actually consume 30, 40 units of blood. People who are pregnant and have major issues with bleeding on delivery, like abruptions and other issues like that, they go through blood like this, and we have to give a lot of blood, a lot of units. So those people benefit, obviously, from receiving blood. But what about the benefits that can be derived from donating blood? Let's talk about that a little bit. So giving blood, there are a bunch of potential health benefits that I actually was not aware of. So I was excited about this. One, it reduces harmful stores, your harmful iron stores, okay? So it reduces the amount of iron you have built up in your body, and that helps to improve your hemorrheology. Giving blood may lower your risk of heart attacks. Did you guys know that? I did not know this. So you might be surprised to discover that giving blood lowers your risk of heart attacks by, actually it says like 88%. So and this study was a study done and put out by the American Journal of Epidemiology. This also relates to storing of iron in your body. So high iron levels in the blood tend to constrict your blood vessels, and it creates more risk of heart attacks. So depleting those extra iron deposits by donating blood gives your vessels more room. There's just more room in the end because they've taken out a little bit of the blood vessels, the red blood cells. So there's less congestion, okay, in the blood vessels. And so it improves your hemorrheology. Giving blood also reduces the risk of developing cancer, and it's the same mechanism. So, and this, in a healthy person, giving blood may not necessarily make you a healthier person, but phlebotomy, or the process of drawing blood, was found to be an iron reduction method that is associated with lower cancer risk and lower mortality. So, and patients that have peripheral vascular disease, so in other words, they have problems with blood flow to their extremities, usually their feet, they tend to benefit from giving blood because it thins out their blood, in other words, and so it helps them to have better flow. And then giving blood can also help your liver stay healthy for the same reason. One of the major causes of cirrhosis, in addition to the one that we know of, which is alcohol use, there's another cause it's like a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that we're seeing more and more. In other words, patients that are a little bit overweight, not even like gross, I'm not talking about morbid obesity. I'm talking about people that are overweight, tend to come in with more liver disease than we used to see them with. So there's this disease caused by hepatitis that kills your liver. There's a disease caused by alcohol that causes cirrhosis. And there's a disease caused by the whole metabolic syndrome where you're just overweight. And the fat that you have and the iron stores tend to cause problems in the liver. So you have iron overload, and it says in recent years, the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the hepatic expression of metabolic syndrome, has reached epidemic proportions. So giving blood reduces the iron load and helps to keep your liver healthy. And then finally, giving blood can help your mental state, just because there are also several physiological benefits, but the most powerful benefit is the fact that you are helping people. You're donating to people that need it. You're giving them the help they desperately need. And right now is a time with COVID. They have had less blood donors than they normally do. So donating blood on a regular basis can be similar to volunteer work. You give your time, and this time you're actually giving literal blood. You're helping strangers in need. And, you go to a specific donation center, you meet the staff who are also dedicating themselves to the task of saving lives. And this kind of regular altruistic interaction has major psychological benefits. So blood donation benefits everyone. It benefits those who are receiving it, and little known fact, it also benefits those who are giving. And so Dr. DeRose actually advocates for people donating blood at least about once a quarter, 4 times a year. But even if you do it twice a year, you're doing your body some good. And it allows your body to, and then if you're drinking, because we build the plasma back very quickly. So drinking the fluids, but it kind of thins out your blood, and everybody's going to benefit. So the first challenge was water up, right? Half your body weight in ounces. So for most adults, that's 6 to 8 glasses of water, or about 4 bottles of if you use a 16-ounce bottle, it's going to be about 4 per day. The second challenge was alcohol down, all right? And then the third challenge is call your local blood bank. All right? So these are the challenges for today. Dave is looking at me like, I don't know about that third one. That's a challenge for me too. I'm not afraid of blood, but I've never donated blood. But if you find out that doing something can improve your chances of, or improve your Methuselah factor, it might be worth trying. You're helping yourself as you help other people. All right? Any questions for me today? You can, okay. Did you guys understand everything that I said? Did I break it down?
Okay, so if someone has iron deficiency anemia, is there still benefits to improving the blood viscosity or the blood fluidity? For donating blood, I mean, is that
if you have iron deficiency anemia, you probably won't even qualify to give blood, to be very honest. Okay. So one of the other benefits of giving blood is the fact that they test your blood, so they can actually detect a lot of things that you probably didn't even know you had. But if you have iron deficiency anemia, you don't have enough blood to donate. Okay. It's not going to make you feel better. You need to, that person or those people that have iron deficiency anemia need to work on improving their iron stores, okay, so that they can build up their RBCs. You don't have enough to share.
Okay. All right. You can share some other way.
Yeah, you can share something else.
All right. And maybe this is getting ahead of maybe future presentations, but how is our immune system impacted by blood viscosity? Or is there any correlation, to our immune system?
We are getting ahead a little bit. There's definitely a correlation, because when your blood is too thick and you're activating fibrinogen and other factors in your body that cause clumping and cause clots, you're also activating your immune system, or you're impacting it in a negative way. In other words, you're impacting it when you don't need to be impacting it. So, and there are several foods that you need to be eating, which we'll talk about immune system and diet and how that plays a part, because there are several foods that we consume on a daily basis that contribute to us having more inflammation in our body than we need to have. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the whole spectrum of foods that cause inflammation a lot of times are the animal products. So, especially if someone's having a lot of allergies, whether it's food allergies or environmental allergies, the things that you really need to decrease, and this is just being practical, I'm not trying to preach any particular message, but your dairy consumption is the first thing that needs to go. So the cheese and the milk, for sure, if you're having problems with, because they contribute to making mucus. And so I'm one of those people that I don't consume a lot of cheese, but I like it. And so, but I know how bad it is. And not just that I know how bad it is, but my system is very sensitive to cheese. So I can tell, because I don't eat a lot of cheese, when I eat cheese, all of a sudden my GI system is reacting differently, right? And it's causing a little bit more constipation because I'm very aware. So self-awareness is important, very important. So I bought cheese this week. What is the the Mexican cheese? What's it called that you like? Queso. My favorite. I bought some queso and chips this week. True confession. And of course, when you get it, it's really nice and warm and very liquid. You dip it and it drips, right? You put it down for just a little bit. What happens to queso? It gets really hard. So if it's getting hard at room air, what do you think is happening in your body? And so, I ate the queso the first day and I did not go back because I saw how lumpy and hard it got. And that reminded me of why I don't eat cheese, because it tends to negatively impact your hemorrheology. It's doing the same thing that it does outside in the body. That's why we drink water rather than molasses.
All right. Well, since you brought up the cheese issue here, can you talk a little bit about why maybe cheese is so difficult for us to give up? Just one of the reasons.
So
There's lots of reasons.
cheese. I'm planning to actually present on cheese because I know cheese is, whereas people have not as hard a time giving up meat, vegetarians really still love their cheese for whatever reason. Cheese, as far as I remember, it can tend to activate the dopamine receptors in our body. So eating cheese is like being a drug addict. The same great hormones and neurotransmitters that are released when an addict takes a hit of, let's say, morphine or Norco or Percocet. Very similar responses are happening in the brain when we consume cheese. So cheese tends to be very addicting. But Cynthia, what do you think? Because I know you have some great thoughts on this as well.
No, I was going to share a little bit about just the components of cheese and the addictive nature is because of those very things that you just mentioned. And a lot of times we can give up the meat a lot easier than we can, like you said, than we can give up the cheese.
Yes.
So that tells us why there's that strong pull. I mean, the body gets very adjusted and attached to the flavor. I mean, it's the salt, it's the fat.
Right.
Yeah. So it's something that we definitely have to be mindful of, and as we start to reduce the amount and just be aware. So I think just that visualization of what the queso did as it sat is a good way to kind of reinforce, why and, what it's doing in our bodies and why it's probably best for us to start eliminating it little by little. But it's a process.
It's a process.
So give yourself some grace and remember, it is something that you have to do little by little. But as you start to eliminate it, you start to kind of lose the taste for it, as
Yes.
with anything that you're starting to eliminate that isn't good for you. So
I agree. Unfortunately, I haven't lost the taste for it, but I just know it's bad for you. So I eat cheese very infrequently, but I broke down this week and I had some cheese, and then I was like, oh, it's clumpy and getting hard. That's why I don't eat it. Go ahead.
I was going to see if there are any other questions in the audience. Yes?
Can you use a mic, Robert? Thank you, Cynthia.
Hi there. So, a question about the water.
Yeah.
So, is there a time frame that we should drink the water to prevent us from having to run to the bathroom all night?
That's a good question. Everybody's going to be different. Honestly, as we age, your body is different. I can drink water right before I go to sleep and I don't get up to pee. I don't get up to go to the bathroom. Everybody's different. But I can tell you this. So the urge to urinate never interrupts my sleep. Very, 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 very infrequently. So I go to bed with a bottle of water next to my my nightstand every night now, because I notice that when I get up in the night, I feel thirsty. And because I understand the benefits of water, and I understand that the time that you are most likely to form clots and heart attacks and strokes is early morning because you've been laying in bed doing nothing, not moving all night. I go to bed with a bottle of water, and I can sip throughout the night, and I still don't have to get up to pee. But my bladder is trained, not in a good way, because I sit in the OR all day, and I can't always go to use the restroom when I need to, okay? So for people who are having problems with having to go to the bathroom, they usually advocate that you stop drinking at least a good 2 hours before you go to bed. Does that make sense? So I think that you're still going to get the benefit of the water if you consume it throughout the day, especially in the morning hours once you get up. I mean, before you leave the house, you should already have consumed at least a bottle, like 2 cups of water, or water with lemon, because you get your system going. So the first urine in the morning is going to be kind of concentrated, but as you go throughout the day, your urine should be starting to look pretty pale. And if it's not, then you're dehydrated. So you can balance your water, front load your water, is what I'm suggesting, if you have problems with having to go to the restroom, because nobody really wants to get up to pee at night if you can help it.
Oh, cold water versus room temperature?
Yeah, okay, so, and I can't tell you the scientific facts, but room temperature or warm water is definitely better. Your body has to work to warm the water up first. So, room temperature water or warm water is supposed to be better for your system. If you can put a little bit of lemon in the water, then that's supposed to, where you alkalinize it, is supposed to be even better. Cold water and cold juices are really not that good for you. But I'll have to have the scientific facts for that. Rob, anything else?
Last question.
Mm-hmm.
So which is worse, a stroke on the left or right side, and then what causes the difference?
Which is worse? If you are a right-handed person, then you want a stroke on the right side of your brain, because the right side of your brain is going to affect the left side of your body, okay? Because the arteries kind of cross as they go up. So they're both bad, but what affects you worse in terms of your ability to function, in terms of your ability to, your quality of life, would be a stroke on the left side of your brain, because the left side of your brain is going to affect the right side of your body, and most of us are right-handers. So if you can't operate, you literally have to learn to write with your left hand, brush your teeth with, that's really awkward, with your left hand and stuff. So if I had a choice, I would stroke on the right side of my brain, because it's going to affect the left side of my body. But if I have a choice, I don't want to stroke at all. That actually is one of the things that I dread. It's very scary, because I've seen how today you're here and then tomorrow you can't speak, or you're struggling to speak, or you can't walk, and it just affects it just totally changes your quality of life. It's so drastic. So it's just the anatomy. The vessels kind of switch as they go up into the neck. They actually kind of cross over. The innovation switches, sorry, not so much the vessels, but the innovation switches. So, Brother Reed.
Okay, you're talking about water. And
Yeah.
First, I'm going to give Cynthia some kudos, because she's been preaching about water for 10 years here now, that we need to drink it. So I guess she's right.
We will not stop preaching about water. It's just
Right.
so fundamental, and it makes such a huge difference in terms of your quality of life that we will not stop preaching about water. It's just one of those things that you always need a reminder about.
Yeah, that's true. My question is all water equal? Because we get water from all kinds of sources now, and I know the natural water, like in Fishers, has a lot of iron in it.
Yeah.
But some of the bottled water, we've seen studies on today's show, with some bottled water is not so good, some is great, some is natural, some is not. What is your thoughts on what water?
I would have to study that. I don't want to mislead you. There's so many theories out there about tap water right now. Have you guys seen those videos, like what's in the tap water? Watch your tap water. There's so many conspiracy theories about COVID and toxins coming through the tap water. You guys don't see this stuff? Okay, maybe it's just me. What's in the tap water? I don't advocate drinking tap water because we don't know what's happening with our tap water. And plus, the pipes that are coming through might be of a condition that the fact that you have all that calcium build up in your bathroom and all that calcium build up on your shower doors and stuff like that suggests to me that the hard water has a lot of chemicals in it. That's just me personally. So, one, I would stay away from drinking 8 glasses of tap water, because if they're depositing all that stuff on your pipes and your doors, then it cannot be doing anything good inside your body. Deionized water and alkalinized water, filtered water, is supposed to be better than unfiltered water because you're trying to get out as many toxins and stuff as you can. You want your water to be more on the alkaline side because health exists in an alkaline body, whereas illness tends to be more apt to happen when your body's too acidic, okay? That's why we eat fruits and vegetables and stuff like that, because you're trying to alkalinize your body. Animal products, dairy and stuff tend to make your body more acidic. So as far as water, I'll have to do some research on that and come back to you. Cynthia, do you have any thoughts on that? But as far as
No, but I love the analogy because I think about, the deposits on my shower door, and the buildup that's occurring there. You don't really think about it. I don't drink tap water, but if I'm in a pinch and I feel dehydrated, then I'm going to go for what's available. So, but
I
mean,
agree.
if we have choices, then definitely the purified water is better. I just had one last question, unless someone else has something. So when
I just a quick follow-up, and then you take on.
No, you go then.
Just part two.
Okay.
So, again, a lot of stuff on health, everywhere now.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things you're reading now says these new types of water are better for you than water, these Kobayashi water and kombucha, whatever it said, things you get in the store. What do you think about these healthy waters that are in the stores, are predominant in health stores and everywhere now?
To be very honest, I don't want to give any advice without having to do my due diligence on that. Because there's some water scams out there too. So I can't advocate for one versus the other without having done the research in terms of what water is better. So how about I try to answer that question on Wednesday evening, Robert?
Okay, thanks.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Because I don't want to just speak off the top of my head and tell you crazy stuff. But I know that there are water scams out there because I've seen where they were saying, like they're trying to say that this water comes from this particular spring and from Switzerland, whatever, and it was tap water. So, but there is something with the water. There is something with the water, and definitely there are better waters than others. I just have to do research in order to be able to tell you.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful because we get confused. We're told to drink water. We
Yeah.
drink tap water, but there's some of the bottled waters are good, some are the spring waters, some are bad, some are good.
Yeah.
There's studies everywhere on what's good and what's bad.
I agree. I think that's a
We
good.
want your advice, you and Cynthia.
I'm going to do some research.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
All right, so this question is again about the positive benefits of alcohol.
Yeah.
So there's so many conflicting reports, and can you talk a little bit about like what you feel really is the true benefit, especially as it relates to red wine? So, because I think that's where the big debate comes in. Is it the wine or is it how the wine is made, what the wine is made from? So
Right.
maybe talk a little bit about that.
It's not necessarily, of course, we know that wine comes from the fermenting process, but the benefit is actually coming from the plant part. So it's the grapes. So let me just do a quick search here. It's the phytochemicals in the wine that you're benefiting from, not so much the alcohol itself. All right? Does that make sense? So, in other words, for people who do not eat leafy green vegetables and fruit, they probably will have a little bit of benefit because alcohol comes from a plant, ultimately. So there's the phytochemicals that are there might be beneficial. But there's so many negative effects of the alcohol that they can't really compare. It's like more than a wash. You're comparing this to this. Like, it's the best thing is to not consume alcohol. If you're consuming alcohol, then you need to try to cut back because it's doing you more harm than good, is the bottom line. All the negative things that you're getting from alcohol don't outweigh the benefits of not using it. Does that make sense? So there may be some cardiovascular benefits, but the majority of the population will not benefit from this because our health is way beyond that. I don't know if that makes sense. What we're consuming in terms of nutrients way outweighs any benefit that you get from alcohol. And alcohol is more of a sedative than, you drink alcohol and it may make you sleepy, so you think it's kind of sedating you and kind of, it's a sedative effect so that people, just like when I give Versed in the OR or another drug, you don't necessarily wake up rested all the time after drinking, So you may fall asleep, but it's not the best. Let melatonin be your friend if you're drinking, if you're trying to find something to bring you down in the evening and help you sleep. Something that's more natural like melatonin will work better in the long run. So, I'm not one of those people who are going to say you're going to go to hell and, if you drink. I'm not that fire and brimstone girl. I'm more of a practical, what's going to be working for you and your health. And in the long run, it doesn't seem like it does. That's just the bottom line. People have to still make their own choices. If you're going to drink, then make sure you're drinking a lot of water to balance it because alcohol is also very dehydrating. So if you can make sure that you're hydrating yourself, then that helps to diminish some of the negative effects because it keeps you from getting drunk and from being really dehydrated. Does that make sense? Any other thoughts? All right. So if there are no other questions, then we're going to end this session. We'll be back on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, and we'll talk about a little bit about water, and we'll talk about diet and that sort of thing, and there'll be a lot more information that we'll have. We'll talk about diabetes as well on Wednesday. All right, next Sabbath, we're hoping to have testing available. So we're going to have 2 nurses to come and help us with testing, and the test that we'll be doing will include like a blood sugar test and cholesterol panel and that sort of thing. And so when Dr. DeVoy presents on the 7th of May, you should have your results so that we'll talk a little bit about levels and where you're supposed to be and where is ideal and that sort of thing. All right? Where do they register? Okay, so we want to ask that you register for the Zoom link using the Capital City website, okay? And that would help. But even if you're not registered, hopefully we'll have the Zoom available so that you can just come on Wednesday evening from the comfort of your home. It'll be on YouTube too? No, just Zoom. On Wednesday, it's on Zoom. It's not live. But Sabbath afternoon is live for the next 4 weeks. For the next 4 weeks, we'll be here live. But until the 14th of May, okay? And then after that, that's when Ted Wilson will be here, the 21st of May. All right, so let's stand for a word of prayer. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope that you were blessed and you got some information that was going to help you in your life, in your journey. Father in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for just your presence here today. We thank you, Lord, that you have made us so wonderfully, and thank you that you remember that we are just dust, and you have mercy on us at every turn. Lord, we need the strength and the discipline to be able to make the right decisions in terms of our health. We know that our bodies are temples, and we want you to be able to dwell in us. We want your Holy Spirit to come and live in us and instruct us in the way that we should go. So give us the discipline that we need. Continue to give us the knowledge that we can share with others so we can live our best lives and have life more abundantly even now and improve our quality of life. Thank you for everyone who's here, everyone who's listening online. And as we go through this week, we ask for your presence, we ask for your protection to be with us. We ask for forgiveness of sins, and we ask that you save us when you come back. In Jesus' precious name, amen.